Hello everyone, welcome to Time Chat. I'm your host, Dr. Yvonne Khan. British playwright Tom Stoppard once said, "I still believe that if your aim is to change the world, journalism is a more immediate short-term weapon." Throughout history, we've been exposed and connected to the news in many different shapes and forms. Oftentimes, people remember historic events happening in the world and the familiar faces that delivered that news. From the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963, to the unexpected death of Princess Diana in 1997, and later on 9/11 and the images we saw on live TV. We all remember sitting in front of our television sets or reading the newspapers to find out more as the world changed before our eyes. In the past 20 years, news reporting shifted from print media and television to online-based articles that we can now access within seconds on our smartphones. As an industry, journalism may have changed forms and taken on newer, faster, real-time delivery, but its importance has remained a vital component in keeping societies informed and keeping those in power in check. The content and objectivity of journalism has also gone through many changes in the United States. About 100 years ago, the Triangle Fire in New York City's garment industry killed nearly 150 people due to unsafe working conditions, which was common at the time. It was exposure through hard-nosed journalism about the dangerous working conditions that led to improved safety standards throughout that industry and helped save countless lives later on. Today, news content can vary from politics to policy, popular culture, human interest stories, celebrity gossip, technology, sports, and anything that you can imagine. In addition to increased reading options for those at home, technological advances help to open up the doors for everyday people to become semi-professional contributors through blogging and other forms of social media. Our guest on Time Chat today will be speaking with us about many of these changes and how she views the journalism field. Johana Bhuiyan is a tech and transportation reporter for BuzzFeed News. In the past several years, BuzzFeed.com has emerged as one of the leading news sites today, read by tens of millions of readers online daily. Johana, who's worked previously as a political and policy reporter in Albany, New York, has taken some time out of her busy schedule at BuzzFeed to speak with us today. Thank you so much for joining us, Johana. How have you been?
I'm good, thank you, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We're so excited to get to learn about you, your work, and your journey into your field of journalism. So how did you end up in this particular field? You work for BuzzFeed. We had a chance to know that. Please tell us about your path.
I think I took what may be sort of a traditional path toward journalism. I think, in my experience as a journalist, you'll find a couple of pockets of people who didn't know what they wanted to do and sort of jumped into journalism because they were writers. And then there are other people who were in law, and then they figured that this is something great, or they liked a particular topic and knew a lot about it and were like, I can write about this. I, on the other hand, have always wanted to be a journalist, and I always say that if I wasn't a journalist, I probably would just be a stay-at-home mom because there was no other option for me. So I went to college for journalism. My first week of classes, I declared my major. Mm-hmm. I worked for the student newspaper, and I left knowing that the only thing I was going to pursue is a job in journalism. So I took a 2-week vacation after I graduated in 2013, which consisted of me applying for every single internship I could apply for. And then so I had an internship at World Policy Journal, and then I got a staff writing position at Capital New York, which is Politico's New York site, and wrote about the media industry, and I covered digital media companies, and so I covered BuzzFeed. And then that's how I got to know the editor-in-chief. That's how I got to the tech editor there at the time, Charlie Warzel, got to know my work. And he reached out to me about a year or so into my job at Capital New York and was like, we have a position open as a tech reporter, and we'd like you to be in that position.
That's great. You mentioned that there's so many different ways one can enter journalism and reach that field, but you as a young girl knew that's what your career goal was. How did you realize that at such an early age?
I don't really know. It's sort of a story that I've told over and over again and said, I've always wanted to be a journalist, so I don't remember the inception point of that idea. I do remember knowing that I've always been a very nosy person who, doesn't just take yes or no for an answer and likes to dig beneath the surface. And I talk a lot, and I like to write. And so that's how I'm a journalist. At the same time, if I was being asked the same question in a job interview, I think the answer that I normally give, and it is true. It just is a little bit more polished. Is that I come from a very diverse background. I'm a Muslim American hijabi in New York. My mom is from the Philippines. My dad is from Bangladesh. Both of them grew up in families that were not so poor, but came from poor countries. And so I've always had sort of this tendency to want to speak for the underdog. Not that we are underdogs, but the people who don't have voices and don't necessarily have the platform to speak, as much as other majority populations would in the United States.
So it's such a fascinating mix that you bring to the table, because there's a lot of folks that are watching at home, and they're from South Asian families, and whether they've realized their passion for journalism or not, there's always that old school traditional pressure from families to enter medicine or engineering or something more stable, as kids are told. What would you tell those folks at home who are hearing those types of messages?
Well, I mean, for one, the media industry right now, I don't know if stable is the best way to describe it, but a lot of media companies are hiring so much, and they're really looking for young, talented reporters, journalists, editors, and so on, who are hardworking and very ambitious. And so I think now more than ever is a great time for people to enter the journalism industry. And companies like BuzzFeed and Vice and other digital media companies that are really well funded and hopefully soon to be profitable are continuously pouring in their resources into news. A lot of people know that BuzzFeed didn't start off as a news website. It started off as an entertainment website. And they, even in some circles now, they're really more well known for their cat lists and their, fun listicles and stuff like that.
And quizzes.
Yes, exactly, quizzes. And that's what people are known for. But what they've done in the last 3 or 4 years since they hired editor-in-chief Ben Smith from Politico, was that they're really building out this news arm of it, and we've sort of separated that brand away from just BuzzFeed, so we're BuzzFeed News, which is kind of its own operating system. But yeah, I mean, that goes to show that they're willing, and a lot of other media companies are following suit, but willing to pour as much resources as they have into just news.
Amazing. And you mentioned that you had declared your major very early on in college. You went to Lehigh University?
Yes.
Tell us about your academic life and how you were involved in your school newspaper. I mean, there are a lot of high school students at home watching who may be interested in joining their school newspaper at their local high school. Yeah. How did that go for you?
I mean, I highly, 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 highly recommend joining any newspaper that you can. In high school, I even tried to do internships at local newspapers. I think the actual real life experience of writing for a newspaper is so much more valuable than learning about journalism. And I sometimes, not that I regret any decision that I made, but I look back and I think, I should have majored in something else and just been in the newspaper, like on our school newspaper, because then I would have a very concentrated expertise in one subject rather than, and because journalism isn't really a study, it's more of a practice. And of course you can study the history of journalism and you can study, how to write this, and this story, but that learning how to write, is something that you can do by practicing.
So you would advise other folks who, keep journalism as a passion and practice it often through participation in the newspaper, but, consider a field that may be different enough so you can have the expertise in that field and you can join the two?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say that I advise. Everyone should do, what they want to do. But I think just looking back now, I write a lot about, things that have to do with business. And I don't have a background in that. And something that I've had to learn and figure out on my own, which isn't necessarily bad. And I think that I've been doing an okay job at it. Yeah. But I mean, it would have been very helpful for me to have majored or at least minored in business. And because that's something that can be applied to every single topic that you write about. And if you want to be a journalist, then that's all you really need to have. Be in the school newspaper, be in every single magazine that you can, make sure you get internships, and then major or at least minor in something else that you can, write about going forward. Not to say that you'll necessarily write about it, but at least you'll have that background.
So one of the things that you do write about often is it's a business, that took many industries by storm. Uber. You download the app on your phone, you connect it to your credit card, and in most major cities, and you can tell us more about that, you can get a taxi within minutes, taking you from one side to the other. How did you get involved in writing about Uber so much? And tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think before we started, it sort of just is something that it just kind of happened randomly. Before my job interview, I was interviewing one of the original investors in Uber, and it was about a completely different story, about a completely different company that he was starting. But the tail end of our conversation just sort of led into Uber, and when I walked into my job interview at BuzzFeed an hour later, that was what was fresh on my mind. And they asked, they're like, what in tech do you like? And I was like, well, let me tell you about this great company that I just talked about. But so, I mean, when I first got started, it wasn't as if they threw me into it and were like, you're writing about Uber, that's it. I sort of tried to make a name for myself by covering as many companies as possible, sort of just earning my keep. And then, as soon as some driver protests happened back in October, Uber drivers were protesting some of the fare cuts and the fact that they weren't getting tips. That was the first time I really covered Uber at all. And then I began following the driver protests. I went to some driver protest meetings. And then from then on, I mean, it's kind of history. I've just been covering it because, as things have been moving, and like you said, it really has changed so many industries, the tech industry, the transportation industry, the way that lawmakers are dealing with the tech industry, and to me, that's so endlessly fascinating. And I think that until I become bored with it, I will still cover it. And that hasn't happened yet. They're just doing really impressive and fascinating things.
So, when we read the headlines, Uber is this very successful company that's valued at this many $10 billion, 10 to 15, 16 billion dollars.
$41 billion.
$41 billion now. So my figures are for a year changing.
No, it's growing.
So it's growing that rapidly, but at the same time, it has its positives and negatives, where a lot of drivers feel that they're a bit disenfranchised and they could be part of some of the success a little bit more. As you know, in the South Asian community, there are a lot of folks working in the transportation industry, and whether they're entering the transportation industry or they've been in it for years, you have options between the yellow taxis, the green taxis, the black cars, the Dial 7s, and now Uber. How would you, advise someone entering, or how would you advise someone who's been in the industry for many years to help them navigate where to end up working for the rest of their years?
Right. I mean, it's hard. I think that a lot of taxi associations are very against Uber and Lyft and other companies like that. And it's because they are sort of taking some of their customers. But in New York, we're very lucky that we have this very robust and efficient taxi and black car industry. And so it's not as if taxis are ever going to go away.
Okay.
And so I think that in other cities where Uber and Lyft are sort of this welcome solution to transportation issues, it's very different. So in those cities like Portland, for example, they don't really have a great taxi system.
Yeah.
And so Uber and Lyft is such a great thing for those customers.
It's really made a difference in their lives?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And in other cities like that as well. And it's made a difference. It's made it easier to get to and from cities. And so in those cities, of course, taxi drivers are really facing the brunt of it. But in New York, a lot of taxi drivers are lucky in that sometimes it's actually easier and quicker for me to go outside in the street and hail a cab than for me to pull my app up and wait those 5 or 10 minutes. And I'm sure that the pickup times are much shorter now, but still, there's traffic and then there's a lot of other things. And so I think that for taxi drivers in New York City, they're not really as badly hurt as a lot of other cities, but I think that they should always be open to exploring your options. Like, why not? The TLC has just enacted laws that would allow drivers to drive for more than one company. And
so you have the option to do both now.
Absolutely.
That's opened up.
Yeah, and so I mean that's something that why not try that out? Why not explore your options and keep your options open and try to have many different revenue streams.
And have maybe one job with Uber working mainly through Uber, and one job through a different type of transportation.
Yeah, because
company.
So if you work for Dial 7, for example, you can be registered with their base, which is what the TLC rule is, that you have to be registered with one base, and that's mainly for accountability issues. So they have all the trip data and that information in case anything goes wrong, and for any other reason. But you can also be dispatched from a different base. So Uber can dispatch you even though you're registered with the Dial 7 base. So that means you can still get rides from Dial 7. Like Dial 7 can still call you up and say, this is a ride that you can pick up. stop. But so you turn your Uber app off at that time. And then when you're done with that ride and you haven't gotten another ride, turn your Uber app on and accept or reject whatever request comes through. And so why not, fill that,
take advantage
fill
options.
that sort of idle time with rides.
Got it. We're going to take a short break. We're joined by Johana Bhuiyan of BuzzFeed News. You're watching Time Chat. We'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back to Time Chat. I'm your host, Dr. Ivan Khan. We're joined by BuzzFeed News reporter Johana Bhuiyan. So, Joanne, we've had a chance to hear a lot about your work and your focus areas in writing about the transportation and technology industry. We're going to shift focus a little bit to other aspects of your work and your life that you feel strongly about. We had a chance to work and serve on a panel for the North American Bangladeshi Islamic Conference. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you do other types of community awareness building on topics that you feel strongly about. Tell us more about work outside of being a reporter.
It's really hard to have a life outside of being a reporter. Mm-hmm. I think that I've sort of thrown myself into my job mostly because, one, like I said, I really do love it, but two, I'm young and I want to really make a name for myself and build a career for myself. So a lot of my focus has been on work. Mm-hmm. And outside of that, there's really, other than trying to sleep and relax, there's not much else that I've been able to do. And that's a sacrifice I sort of am willing to make right now. But so a lot of my focus are just on issues that relate to my job and relate mm-hmm. to things that I write about, because that's kind of everything that I know and work on right now. But outside of Uber, there's sort of this larger issue of employment and sort of what the labor force looks like now. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Uber and companies like Airbnb even and HomeAway and other on-demand companies are not employing any of the people who work for them. They're independent contractors. So they're not afforded the same benefits that an employee would be afforded, such as workers' compensation and a salary and stuff like that. But what they're trading in instead is a flexible work work schedule, and they're sort of their own boss, and companies like to call them entrepreneurs, and they get to decide what they do and don't want to do. But there are a lot of current cases that are going to federal courts that are saying that drivers and other independent contractors are being misclassified as independent contractors, and they're saying that companies like Uber are sort of just trying to exploit them and get cheap labor essentially, because they don't have to pay them a salary and they don't have to get them health care and stuff like that. And so the whole idea is that these companies are telling them exactly how to perform their jobs by giving them training, by saying that they can or cannot do this or this in their car, and telling them, beyond this is the quality that we expect, like this is what you have to do to continue to be on our system. And that sort of, a lot of people believe conflicts with the status of an independent contractor, because you should be free to do anything as long as you're performing, a minimum quality. So
labor rights and workers' rights, starting off not only in the transportation industry, but they can kind of expand the board.
Yeah, no, it's throughout the tech. There's such a huge trend of on-demand companies right now. There's like Uber for everything. Yeah. And so none of those people who are working for those companies are employees. And it's something that companies like that sort of need to do. Like they can only really hire contractors, because then how would they achieve that scale, at that pace? But at the same time, if you're misclassifying them, there are so many penalties for that. There's fines and stuff like that. But on top of that, like if Uber, independent contractors and Uber drivers have been actually employees this whole time, that means all their expenses all the other costs of being a driver should have been paid by Uber.
Sort of paid by the employer.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's sort of a case that's going on right now that I think is really interesting, and it also has a lot of implications for the future of the labor force because these companies are not going to stop coming up.
And this is the latest trend. It's kind of happening in not only the transportation industry,
It's tech
but just
throughout.
delivery and technology and everything.
And the on-demand economy is something that existed well before Uber, but I think Uber really popularized, or at least put it on, somewhere that on everyone's radar.
Great.
But yeah.
So, we mentioned that you had a chance to work in Albany.
I worked in New York. Capital New York has an Albany headquarters, but also.
So your work was based out of New York City, covering stories up from Albany and the policy. In
well,
New
no.
York
So
State?
the Albany bureau just covered politics up in the state house and stuff like that. And the city bureau, I didn't cover politics because I don't know anything about politics, but I covered the media industry in New York City.
So what's it like working in New York City?
It's good. I mean, I'm a born and bred New Yorker. I spent like my entire life coming in and out of the city. I originally am from Queens, then we moved to Long Island, and so, I like it a lot. And it's sort of my pace, and that's kind of how my personality is, and so it works really well for me. Yeah. And
not only have you got a chance to cover one of the most innovative companies that we've been exposed to in Uber, you get to work, and cover a lot of their work. But BuzzFeed, they've really taken our news feeds to the way we read the news, to the way we kill time on our phones by storm. What's it like working for such an innovative company like BuzzFeed? Is it as fun as the articles are?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably one of the most rewarding experiences that I've ever, and I, like I said, I am young, so that you sort of have to take that with a grain of salt, but I mean, it is one of the most rewarding experiences. I mean, there's such a merit to writing for a company that originally was an entertainment site, because they have the audience. People are going there to look for those lists and quizzes, and they know that they like BuzzFeed, and now they have news. And so, and I think that the greatest part about it, and it's sort of, BuzzFeed is kind of what you expect it would be. It's like a lot of young people, but it's young people who know what they're doing and who are very hardworking and very ambitious. And being among them is very inspiring. And at the same time, we have, people who have been in the industry for years and years, and who are also, it just is amazing to work alongside. We have Pulitzer winners, and we have Mark Schoofs from ProPublica, who's the head of our investigations unit. We have, just Ben Smith even, who is our editor-in-chief.
He came great from mentorship, and you have a lot of amazing, hungry young minds who are just willing to put in a lot of great work.
Yeah, and the great thing about it is that it's not as if like anyone's holding anything over your head. Like we're all working alongside each other. We're all just as hungry, just as hardworking, and we all, you wouldn't be there unless you earned your right to be there or deserve to be there.
So that sounds like a really, really fun, exciting place to work, and I hope that youngsters at home are paying attention to the opportunities that that our great city has in companies like Uber and BuzzFeed. You've mentioned having a few different ways you identify yourself. You mentioned you're a reporter, you're hijabi, and you're from two backgrounds. How would you identify your community? Are they reporters, or is it a mix of all of the above? And how do you hope to leave a lasting impact?
Yeah, I think that people are sort of under the impression that you can only be a part of one community, and I think that's definitely not true, and I think I'm a testament to that. I am Bengali, but I'm also Filipina, and I'm also Muslim, and I'm also hijabi, and I'm also New Yorker, and I'm also American, and I'm also a reporter. And these are all things that, it's not as if being a Bengali prohibits me from being a part of the Filipino community, and so I think that you can be a part of all of that, and, just strive to be the best that you can be. As cliche and annoying as that sounds, just try to be the best that you can be and work really hard. And I think that that's the only impact that I want to leave.
Great. So the last few questions are always a little bit more about you as an individual. We got a chance to learn a lot about your career and the work that you do. So how would your friends and family describe you?
I think that you probably should ask them, but I hope that they would describe me as an ambitious, passionate person. I have 3 older brothers, and so I was the only girl, and I'm, the youngest, and so I think that I've always been very competitive. Yeah, I mean, I think that pretty much, I can be very aggressive, but it's just sort of part of my nature. But yeah.
And you've had a chance to work in the tech and transportation reporting industry. Are there any other facets of journalism or any other things that you want to add to your resume down the line in your career that you look forward to working on?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of went into journalism with this very idealistic perception of journalism, where journalism means that you're on the front lines of every war, covering what's going on. But that's not what journalism is. It is that, but it's much more than that as well. So, I mean, I think down the road, I mean, who knows what's going to happen? I had no idea that I was going to write about technology. I had no idea that I was going to write about media, and I had no idea that I was going to write about Uber or that even would exist. So I can't predict the future. I know that I love writing about tech right now, and I really, really am enjoying writing about Uber. But I mean, more things will come.
Excellent. Before we, say our goodbyes, we have a lot of younger families at home. Young mothers, young dads, high school students, college youngsters. What final message do you have for them at home? Anything you'd like to share before we finish up for today?
I mean, I would say, I went into journalism because it's exactly what I wanted to do. And, I'm sure that there were naysayers, and it's not something that, a Muslim hijabi is traditionally, it's not a field that Muslim hijabis are traditionally in. But I mean, it's exactly what I wanted to do, and I knew that, and I pursued it. And I think that that's something that people should do. Don't do something because it will make you money. Don't do something because someone told you to do it. Give yourself, of course, to ask people's advice and take people's guidance, but give yourself the benefit of the doubt. Pursue what you want to pursue, and do it because it'll make you happy.
Awesome. It's a pleasure meeting you and having you on our show, Johana. I know we hope to have you back in the future, and the best of luck at BuzzFeed News, and keep us up to speed on what's happening on all the beats that you cover.
Thank you.
Thank you again for joining us on Time Chat.
Of course, thank you.
We just had a chance to hear from today's guest, BuzzFeed News reporter Johana Bhuiyan. With South Asian New Yorkers becoming one of the fastest growing immigrant groups in New York City, we at Time Chat will be looking to connect you viewers at home to the stories and careers of today's professionals and all-stars. In addition to establishing careers in law, many Bangladeshi graduates are entering traditional fields such as medicine, pharmaceuticals, engineering, as well as paving the way for careers in the humanities and arts. More and more Bangladeshi Americans are entering fields such as journalism, marketing, entrepreneurship, and the not-for-profit sector. The biggest mistake that I believe young people can make is to allow someone else to choose their career for them. Today's graduates will likely have several goals and pathways in mind. Those goals will change a lot in your 20s. Taking the appropriate amount of time to better understand your passion can save you a lifetime of doing the wrong career. By choosing the career path that's most meant for you, you won't ever feel like you're working for a job, but just getting to practice your passion every day. In the next few weeks, we'll be speaking to high school seniors who've just received their college admissions this month. We're proud to host some fantastic students that have just received their acceptances from some of the top universities in this nation with amazing scholarships. Until then, thank you for watching Time Chat. I'm your host, Dr. Ivan Khan. We look forward to seeing you all for next week's show. And until then, pay it forward.